2 Samuel chapter 20. It is a graphic tale we're about to read tonight. If I give you some of the names, you can almost anticipate what you're going to read. Here we have the rebellion of Sheba, but the other main characters in this story almost dwarf Sheba. We're going to read about Amasa and about Abishai, and again about Joab. And he hadn't changed. He's going to be Joab here tonight. And then we read about another character, a very interesting lady, the wise woman of Abiel that saved her city. But the way she saved it, well, as I tell you, it's a bloody tale that we'll have tonight. But I want to remind you of something. When Absalom had become king in Jerusalem, he did so by stealing the hearts of the people away from David. And you'd wonder how he could have done that. Now, David escaped from Jerusalem, but just with a small band of men. But these were his elite soldiers, and they were led by Joab. And then Absalom, he appointed Amasa to be the captain of his host. And Amasa gathered all the men of Israel together and went out in great numbers after David. But David diverted the battle, or Joab did, up into the woods of Ephraim. And they couldn't fight with their superior forces there. And Joab, he knew how to fight, and his men knew how to fight, and they defeated them. And Joab threw the darts into the heart of Absalom, causing David great grief. But then for David to return to Jerusalem, he's returning to a people that had rejected him as being king. Now, he had his small band of loyalists and followers, but it wasn't the nation. And even Judah itself wasn't so sure they were really wanting to welcome David back. And so what David did politically, this might have been politically wise, it wasn't militarily wise, but what David did politically to win back the hearts of his people, he appointed Amasa to be the captain of the host instead of Joab. He had already failed once, and now he did that to appease his people. And so Judah, they kind of welcomed David back to Jerusalem. They see David doesn't mean harm to us, and maybe that did help win the hearts back to do that. But then the rest of the tribes of Israel are looking at this, and they're feeling like, well, Judah, why are they being treated so special here? And doesn't David have a portion with us? And so the thing is very unstable, and it's almost like somebody spilled all the gasoline, and all you needed was a match to set it all off. And Sheba decides he'll be that match. He's going to try to take advantage of this situation and create turmoil throughout Israel, and he is going to greatly overestimate himself. But he had David worried. Now that's where we've come to in this story. And so here's the memory work, just to give you a little preview. You know how sometime in the movie they give you a little preview of what's going to happen? So you'll go watch the movie, Well, you can look at this memory verse this way. This is the way things are going to work out. It says here, Amasa wallowed in the blood in the midst of the highway. And when the man saw all that the people stood still, he removed Amasa out of the highway into the field and cast a cloth upon him. And when he saw that every one that came by him stood still. What an awful. I wouldn't have picked that for the memory verse. I don't even want to remember that very long and think about it. But that's just kind of one of those previews then of what's going to happen during this story. Here it is. There happened to be there a man of Belial. Now, when you read about a man of Belial, Belial is not a person. Belial stands for that which is worthless. And so a man of Belial, this is a worthless fellow. And in fact, some of the modern translations won't translate a man of Belial. They go ahead and interpret that for you because they don't think you'll be smart enough to figure out what that means. So they just tell you, this man was a worthless fellow. And that is what is meant by that expression, a man of Belial. So there happened to be a man of Belial whose name was Sheba, the son of, now let me get this pronunciation right. I'm going to pronounce that CH like cherry. Bichri, okay? The son of Bichri, a Benjamite. And he blew a trumpet and said, "We have no part in David, neither have we inheritance in the sons of Jesse. Every man to his tent, soul Israel." In other words, he said, you just abandoned David. We don't need David. Everybody can just go home. Well, he didn't really want them to go home. I wonder if these were the military tents. He tried to get people to follow him. It says in verse 2, "So every man of Israel went up from after David and followed Sheba, the son of Bichri. But the men of Judah clave unto their king from Jordan even to Jerusalem." These are the men of Judah that are escorting David home, and they didn't abandon him, but they carried him all the way into Jerusalem. Now, when David gets to Jerusalem, first thing he does, he came to his house at Jerusalem, and the king took the 10 women, his concubines, remember they're the ones it said that whom left to keep the house, and put them in a ward to feed them, but went not in unto them. So they were shut up unto the day of their death, living in widowhood. You remember how Absalom had gone into them. So he just kind of put those 10 concubines away. But now in verse 4, "Then said the king to Amasa, Assemble me the men of Judah within 3 days, and be thou here present." Amasa, you got to get the army back together. I'll give you 3 days. You bring them here to Jerusalem and have them come see me. See, he's going to go after Sheba. But Amasa is incompetent. He does not know how to do this. He's the captain of the host, but he doesn't have any host. And he doesn't know how to get these men together. So Amasa went to assemble the men of Judah, but he tarried longer than the set time which he had appointed him. 3 days go by, and he hadn't got it done yet. And David's not going to wait on this. David said to Abishai, now you remember him, that son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, one's always ready to take off somebody's head, you know, when Shimei was cursing David, he said, let me go take off his head. So he's a little brother to Joab, and he's a lot like his big brother. But he didn't turn to Joab here. He turns to Abishai. And he says, now Sheba, the son of Bichri, will do us more harm than did Absalom. Take thou thy Lord's servants and pursue after him, lest he get him fenced cities and escape us. And there went out after him Joab's men, and the Cherethites, and the Pelethites, and all the mighty men. And they went out of Jerusalem to pursue after Sheba, the son of Bichri. Okay, so this is, they're going with Abishai. Now, when we're having our class back there, we talk about these folks. They're not the Cherethites and the Pelethites. They're the Cherebites and Pelethites, aren't they? Okay, that's the way we can kind of remember them. But that's who they are. Now, these are the elite soldiers, you know, and they're Joab's men. And now they're following Joab's brother. Well, they're going to head off after Sheba. And it says they were at a great stone, which is in Gibeon. They've gotten that far north. They've gotten up to Gibeon. And Amasa went before them. Now, Amasa shows up. Okay, I'm captain of the host. I'll lead you, men. I'll lead you against Sheba. He didn't get his men together. So he shows up and tries to take over and says, well, I'll lead now, Abishai. And now we got Joab here. And Joab's garment that he had put on was girded unto him, and upon it a girdle with a sword fastened upon his loins, and the sheath thereof, and as he went forth it fell out. Well, now, this Joab, he's going along with this. So Joab's going with his brother. His brother's leading the men, and Joab, he's along. And this is a little hard to figure out exactly what happened, but let me describe it this way. He's got his sheath. Okay, you put your short sword down in your sheath, and it's girded on him, and Joab sees a mesa. So Joab turns and starts walking toward a mesa. Now, if you were a mesa, would that worry you? I tell you, it would me with Joab. I mean, he's the captain of the host that Joab has been, and here comes Joab right for me. And so Joab is going to put a mesa off guard, and he lets his sword fall out of his sheath. So, you know, if he's not armed, he's not going to be dangerous, is he? So he lets the sword fall out. It fell on the ground, and he walks over to Amasa. And Joab said to Amasa, "Art thou in health, my brother?" That sounds kind of nice. "Are you feeling all right, brother?" And he took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. Now, see, that's your sword hand, okay? So he takes him, the hand he takes him by the beard. Now, once a fella gets a hold of your beard, you know, you don't move a whole lot with that beard there. So he takes him and he's going to kiss him. Now, we read in the New Testament about the kiss of Judas, don't we? I'll tell you, this is probably the second worst kiss in all the Bible, because he takes Amasa, takes him by the beard, he's going to kiss him. But Amasa took no heed, verse 10, to the sword that was in Joab's hand. Well, if he took your right hand, that's your sword hand, took you right by the beard, but he's got a left hand. And it sounds to me like he had another sword. So he let one fall out, make it look like he doesn't have a sword, but he's got another one tucked away. That's what it sounds like to me. Either that or somehow he picked it up, but it just sounds like maybe he had another sword. And he has that in his left hand. And so he took the sword that was in Joab's hand, and he smote him therewith in the fifth rib, and shed out his bowels to the ground, and struck him not again, and he died. So Joab and Abishai his brother pursued after Sheba, the son of Bichri. Well, that was kind of an ugly little trick he pulled, wasn't it? And Joab, he knows how to kill a man, but he also knows how to really hurt a man so that he doesn't die fast. Joab is just mean, I tell you. He could have just killed him, but he didn't hit him again. He just gutted his bowels out and let him lay there. And then he and his brother take off after Sheba. And one of Joab's men stood by him and said, "He that favoreth Joab and he that is for David, let him go after Joab." Well, it's Joab's men that Abishai was leading, so now they're glad to go after Joab, and Joab's going to go after Sheba. And that's where we got that memory verse. Poor Amasa. He wallowed in the blood in the midst of the highway. And when the man saw all that the people stood still, it must have been a gruesome sight. These old hardened soldiers go down and then see, and they just stopped. I mean, this is an awful scene, isn't it? And so he took him out into a highway, put him in the field, cast a cloth on him. When he saw every one of them that came by him stood still. Well, just cover him up with some kind of cloth, and now they don't see him, and so he's going to die there, that agonizing death under that cloth out in the field, so they can go on down the highway. And when he was removed out of the highway, all the people went after Joab to pursue after Sheba, the son of Bichri. Now, here's what happens. Sheba, he wasn't really what he thought. He had overestimated his ability to lead people and to cause them to rebel against David, because it sounds like he kind of took off and he's the only one he's leading here. He did come, he went through all the tribes of Israel unto Abiel and to Beth Maacah. Okay, let's see where that is. And all the Berites, and they were gathered together, and they went also after him. And he came and besieged him in Abiel of Beth Maacah, and they cast up a bank against the city, and stood in the trench, and all the people that were with Joab battered the wall to throw it down. He did get into one of those fenced cities, like David said. But Joab's just going to tear it all down. So, let's show you. Here's where he went. I mean, he really tried to get away, didn't he? That's way up north there. That's way up north of the Sea of Galilee. This Abel Beth Maacah. And look at that. It says 2014 dig sites. There is some archaeological digs and investigations going on at that site. And it's one of these sites that had been abandoned. And so they're trying to find out what they can find out about these times by doing the digs in that site. But that's where that Sheba went, and that's where the city was. Now, the city had a reputation of a city where when you got the counsel from that city, there wasn't any reason to say anything else. There's a wise woman there, and it sounds like she may have been in a line of wise women at Abel Beth Maacah. And so there cried a wise woman out of the city. Here he's banging on the wall, going to tear it down, and this wise woman comes out and says, Here I pray you unto Joab, come near hither that I may speak unto thee. And when he was come near to her, the woman said, Art thou Joab? And he answered, I am he. And she said unto him, Hear the words of thy handmaid. And he answered, I do hear. And she spake, saying, They were wont to speak in old time, saying, They shall surely ask counsel at the bill. And so they ended the matter. I mean, of old times, I tell you, people used to really respect this little town up here. And the wise women that were here. I mean, when we said that was it, that kind of settled things. He reminded Joab of their past reputation. Now, we don't have record of what that was, but evidently Joab understood it. And she's reminded Joab of that past. And then she says this, I'm one of them that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. Thou seekest to destroy a city and a mother in Israel. Why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? That mother in Israel may have been her she's referring to. You're going to destroy this city, and everybody, that'll be me too. And people recognize me as a wise woman in Israel, a mother in Israel. You're going to destroy all this. So, verse 20. Joab answered and said, Far be it from me that I should swallow up or destroy. The matter is not so. But a man of Mount Ephraim, Sheba, the son of Berchri by name, hath lifted up his hand against the king, even against David. Deliver him only, and I'll depart from this city. And the woman said unto Joab, Behold, his head shall be thrown to thee over the wall. Well, that's what happened. They went over there and cut his head off and threw it over the wall. So that took care of that problem, didn't it? And the woman went unto all the people in her wisdom, and they cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Bichri, and cast it out to Joab. And he blew a trumpet, and they retired from the city, and every man to his tent, and Joab returned to Jerusalem, the king. I tell you, Joab, he is something else. He just makes you cringe, doesn't he? But he gets a job done. That's what Joab's great strength was, his competence as a warrior and as a leader of fighting men. Now, that's what he was good at. And we can sit here and cringe at his methods, but he was one that knew how to get the job done. Amasa couldn't do it, and Joab did. And David must have recognized that in Joab. And David then reorganizes his administration, and we have a list of those who became the leaders in David's new administration here in Jerusalem. And so Joab, he's back over all the host of Israel. That's where he belongs. That's what he's good at doing. And so David lets him be the captain of the host again. And Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites. The Cherethites and Pelethites. Okay. So Benaiah is going to take care of that. And Adoram was over the tribute. He's secretary treasurer, I guess, tax collector. And Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahiad, was the recorder. So he's the official historian to make sure everything gets written down so we know the right story about all this. I guess you'd call him the press secretary, wouldn't you? Okay, he's the recorder. And then Sheba was a scribe, and Zadok and Abiathar are the priest, and Ira. Now here's where you read about Ira in the Bible. You know someone named Ira? It's not a common name, but every now and then you come across, I don't know if they're named for this fella or not, but here's an Ira in the Old Testament. Ira also the Jerite was a chief ruler about David. I think today we call them what? The president's chief of staff? Isn't that what they call him, the chief of staff? Okay, and that's a very powerful person, see? They kind of do all the real work for the king. The king kind of says what he wants done and turns it over to his chief of staff, and he makes sure it gets done. And so that's Ira, the Jairite, chief ruler about David. What a story. I mean, I don't really like to dwell on these gory stories, but boy, they are graphic in the Old Testament, aren't they? And so here's that site. Here we are, Abel Beth Maacah. This is where they're making that archaeological dig. And you see the road there kind of compassing the high ground, the hill, and that steep slope going up from that road up to that flat top. That's probably where the wall was. And so they got the wall, and they're digging into where the city was, and it looks like they're kind of finding, down under all that dirt, they're sort of finding how the city was structured. I don't know really I'm not sure they know what they're looking for, but anything that'll help them understand. You know, sometimes they do all that digging, and they come up with broken pottery and things like that, and sometimes there's engravings, a name or something on there and all. And one archaeologist said they're looking for that wise woman. Well, I doubt they'll find her, but they may find some evidence of her if you know. So it's interesting that they are doing that dig, and that might reveal to us something to help us understand those times of David. Here are the people we read about. What a story. Sheba, the son of Bichri, Amasa, Abishai, Joab, one of Joab's men. He's the one that took Amasa out of the highway. The wise woman of Abel of Beth Maacah, Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, Adoram, Jehoshaphat, the son of Elihud, Sheba, Zadok and Abiathar, the priest, and Ira, the Jairite. And so more individuals and people as a part of David's men. Well, that's the story from 2 Samuel chapter 20. That doesn't really lend itself to an invitation, does it? But boy, I'm glad I wasn't a Mesa, aren't you? I mean, I would have been scared. As soon as David appointed me captain of the host instead of Joab, I'd said, David, couldn't you find somebody else? And I may have suggested somebody I really didn't like to take that job because that's a dangerous position, and Joab wasn't going to have it. And so you don't want to be a Mesa, but it's going to be worse than that. It could be worse for you than that. If you don't die in the Lord, gain it. I'm also thinking about how that poor old Sheba. I mean, why should the whole city suffer for one man? Let's take his head off and throw it over the wall. You know, that's what the high priest said about Jesus. Why should the city of Jerusalem place itself in danger for this one man? Let's crucify him. That's what the high priest said about Jesus, wasn't it? Well, it just reminded me of that. You need to obey the gospel of Christ. That's what you need to do. And if you haven't done it before tonight, now's a good time to do it. And if you slipped away, then you need to find yourself, come back. And you have an opportunity to let them be known that you want to do that as we sing the invitation song.